Railway service on the island of Newfoundland, Canada's easternmost province, officially ended September 30th, 1988. The railway had served Newfoundland for well over a century and was an important factor in the development of the economy. Track construction began in 1881, and by 1898, the main line between St. John's and Port aux Basques, as well as numerous branches to outlying communities, had been completed. Railway mileage peaked during the 1920s at just over 900. Narrow gauge railways have always had interesting motive power, and the Newfoundland Railway was no exception. When Newfoundland joined Canada in 1949, the railway became part of the Canadian national system. Along with a well-worn railway, CN inherited 46 steam locomotives of various types and manufacture, as well as 3 center cab diesels. CN spent heavily on improvements to the system. 53 new diesels began arriving in 1952, and complete dieselization was achieved by 1957. Extensive track projects brought schedule and service improvements, and until 1965, traffic volumes actually increased. That year, the Trans-Canada Highway opened across the province, and from that date on, rail traffic declined. The first victims were trains 101 and 102, CN's Caribou, more affectionately known as the Newfie Bullet. They made their last runs on June 3, 1969, having been replaced by buses. Mixed trains continued to operate on 3 branches until 1984, when their demise left only the mixed between Bishop's Falls and Corner Brook to run until the end. Freight traffic also caused revenue problems, and a 1980 move by CN's TerraTransport division to containerization proved to be only a temporary solution to the inroads being made by trucks and ships. By 1988, the railway was down to 554 miles, and the regular Port aux Basques to St. John's freights, 203 and 204, were running fewer than 5 times a week. On June 20th, 1988, the announcement that had been rumored for months was finally made. The railway would be shut down. $800 million would be spent to upgrade roads, but Newfoundland would be left without its railway. Though TerraTransport began the process of closing down the railway in July, it was not until September 29th that the last eastbound freight departed Bishop's Falls. We'll ride that train, Extra 944 East, as it makes its historic run through Clarenville and on to St. John's. Before sunrise, and in what varied between heavy drizzle and moderate rain, our crew marshaled the units and then proceeded with assembling the consist. Our train will have little in common with its predecessors, though. Before 1984 and the introduction of the manual block system, it would have been known as 204 rather than an extra. And instead of the normal 80-plus cars seen in previous years, we will have a mere 6 plus the van. Once coupled to the van, the consist backs to the station, where paperwork is completed and the manual block system clearance is issued. While this is occurring, a lone photographer records the event.
Bishop's Falls. proceed from Bishop's Falls to
Clarenville. Restrictions nil. Ambient bulletins in effect. 407, 420, 434, and 435.
FGD train dispatcher. Over.
Once the high ball is given, Extra 944 East departs Bishop's Falls and crosses the Exploits River. This bridge is the railway's longest span, 927 feet. Moose, which were brought to the island in 1904, have become very plentiful, and we see our first one just east of Rattling. Notre Dame, until recently, was the junction of the 9.4-mile branch to Lewisport, a busy harbor on Notre Dame Bay. "55 miles east of Bishop's Falls, we'll pass the town of Gander. Now the site of an international airport, during World War II, Gander served as a main staging area for transatlantic ferry flights and is well remembered by thousands of Allied flyers. Those of you with a sharp eye have surely noticed our speedometer reads 0. It gave up the ghost just west of Rattling. But as per the rules, the dispatcher was notified and we got the okay to proceed to St. John's. Our train is now skirting the western boundary of Terra Nova National Park. This park encompasses 153 square miles along the rugged coast of Buena Vista Bay. 20 miles south of Terra Nova Park, we approach the division point of Clarenville. In addition to the railway, Clarenville has a long tradition of shipbuilding, and in 1955, it became the North American terminal for the 2,250-mile transatlantic telephone cable. Although Clarenville Yard certainly shows a lack of activity, our arrival at the station and final crew change will be well recorded.
While you're on camera.
This is the end of the line.
I got it done, Doctor. I got it done, my dad.
It's the last time I'll be signing this one.
This last one, winner? You want to hunt tomorrow?
Oh, yes.
All right. Don't forget my fright.
No, I don't want to be too early.
After the crew change and 3 flats are set off to be used in future track removal projects, the train recouples. The motive power now outnumbers the cars, although only the 2 lead units are running. The 3 trailing units, 2 guns of scrapped freight cars, as well as the tank and van will all continue to St. John's. In the weeks prior to the shutdown, very little revenue freight was moved, and trains ran only to place equipment in locations that would prove strategic for dismantling work, scrapping, or future sale. At 14:37, 5 hours and 25 minutes after leaving Bishop's Falls, Extra 944 East departs Clarenville for the final 131 miles to St. John's. The railway's 900 series units were unique to the island. GM Diesel developed them specifically for narrow gauge operations, and 47 were built between 1952 and 1960 at their London, Ontario plant. Classed as NF110 and NF210s, these units have a 12-cylinder 567C engine, 6-wheel trucks, and develop 1,200 horsepower. Having an exceptionally roomy cab and good ride, they were well liked by the operating crews, and the excellent condition of the units shows the pride shop crews had in the railway's equipment.
Dispatcher, St. John's, over.
Stand by for 944, probably 112, over.
College 112, yes. Okay, Jim. George Lake says for not to shut down the engines, leave them run tonight, over.
You tell George Lake he's a good man.
I'll tell him that. Them ready?
For the lighter branch lines, the railway also had 6 smaller units on the roster. Classed as G8s, these units were an offspring of a standard production export model. They were low-slung, developed 875 horsepower, and had 6-wheel trucks. Unlike the 900s, crews said the 800s rode like bucking broncos. Our train is now traversing the Avalon Peninsula, and as we pass Placentia Junction, you'll be able to make out the former right-of-way of the 21-mile Argentia branch. We leave Extra 944 east at Whitbourne in order to make a road cruiser connection back to Bishop's Falls. But later communication with our crew found arrival in St. John's to be dark, rainy, and totally unnoticed. In contrast to freight, the departure of the railway's last passenger service went anything but unnoticed. The Bishop's Falls to Corner Brook run was all that remained of the Trans-Island service, which started June 29, 1898. And like the first, this final run was national news.
Maybe back 20, 25 years ago, if we had lined up still at the ticket counter to travel on the trains, no doubt the passenger trains would still have been running. But, having said that too,
Do you have paper 4-year-olds?
No.
Okay, well,
One way?
One in. No, but return.
Okay.
While passengers eagerly purchase tickets for the historic run, the crew has gathered at the booking-in office to register and read the bulletins.
Come on now, gentlemen.
Oh, look, you got the gear on this morning, huh?
Yes, he looks pretty good.
Oh, yeah. That's no good if you read that now.
No, my reading days are over, sir.
You going, Fred?
You don't know what to do now.
No.
Go on, train me.
With yard crews long ago abolished at Bishop's Falls, the crew's first task is to marshal the train. Though the Bishop's Falls to Corner Brook route was part of that traveled by the legendary Newfie Bullet, our train will have little else in common. Since 1969, this passenger service has been merely a coach tacked onto the tail end of freights 203 and 204. It was only when total abandonment was announced that an extra coach was added to handle the extra load. As with other trains, this one will also be used to position motive power prior to the shutdown. After a bad order van is set off and the crew has joined for a farewell portrait and tune, passenger extra 917 West, better known as 203 to the locals, is on her way. As we pass the next station, Grand Falls, notice the TerraTransport road cruiser buses. These are the vehicles which spelled doom to the original Newfie Bullet. sticky brake halts our progress for a few minutes, but after some expert attention, we're on the way again. As we continue west to our next stop, word from the conductor busily collecting tickets is that the mood in the coaches is rather jovial. The logging community of Badger is the next stop. It is here that the Trans-Canada Highway swings north to avoid crossing the Northern Barrens, while the railway ventures straight ahead to the Topsails. A number of towns exist along this remote 79 miles, and with no roads, the mixed provides their only access to the outside world. Just after we pass Skull Hill, the train slows for Millertown Junction, formerly an interchange point with the American Smelting and Refining Company's railway. Being the last run, our crew knows there will be lots of work at each of the settlements west of Caribou. So what better place than here to temporarily halt our progress and officially celebrate the passing of Mix 203, Extra 917 West.
And we're at Caribou. Caribou.
That's Sparky. They're going up again.
With the cake cut, toasts proposed and the songs sung, we depart Caribou and continue the climb to Summit, mileage 328.5. With an elevation of 1,566 feet, Summit is the highest point on the Newfoundland Railway. For the next 15 or so miles, the mixed really earns its keep, with numerous stops and lots of action at the baggage car door. In addition to the normal items, a great number of plastic pails are boarded. Each is filled to the brim with wild berries.
One car, one. Over there, clear hole. Where's all this clear going? All right, okay. You get the box fine? Huh?
As with any decision to end rail service, this one also is greeted with a few signs of protest. As we descend towards Howley, the barrens slowly give way to stands of black spruce and balsam fir, while ahead in the coaches, the party continues. Just out of Howley, we skirt Grand Lake, the province's largest. Then at mile 364, we cross the dam that controls the lake's level. Deer Lake is our last major stop before Corner Brook. As this is the first point west of the Barrens that we meet the Trans-Canada Highway, a number of passengers detrain here and head for their vehicles. The final few miles towards Corner Brook is an ideal time to reflect back on our 2 runs. Having traveled 3 of the railway's 4 subdivisions and seeing the associated geography, one can easily see why that early government, in the interest of economics, chose narrow gauge. Even their early ruling that the railway would not be a first-class line held true for its entire life, except in one major area. Newfoundland railroaders displayed a unique pride in what they referred to as their railway. With their pride and dedication, the railroaders, if not the railway, were first class in every way. Just prior to Corner Brook, we passed the beautifully preserved equipment of the Railway Society of Newfoundland. The Society's most prized piece is 593, the Newfoundland Railway's only surviving steam locomotive. A 462, 593 was built by Baldwin in 1920. And retired in 1958. The mix does not travel as far west as the actual Corner Brook station, but instead stops at what is little more than a worn path along a city road in the East End. Once all passengers detrain, the consist moves into the yard. The power is cut off, goes to the shop, and the Bishop's Falls to Corner Brook mixed becomes history. The following week, while newspapers across the country carried stories of the closing, and a very successful marketing campaign promoted the new CN, TerraTransport intermodal service, very little, if any, activity could be found on the railway. At Bishop's Falls, a lone work train ties up after a day of dismantling work along the Bishop's Falls sub.
Gotta bring those things in now because they rob them, eh?
Yeah, steal.
In the yard, equipment which could not be sold was cut up for scrap, while across the track, Even the crew rest house has a for sale sign on the door. At St. John's, the scene was similar. The once bustling shop lay silent, kept company only by lines of no longer needed motive power and rolling stock. Even the railway's business car, Terra Nova 2, had seen its last trip, but her condition shows the railway's pride even during the austere final years.